It was an ordinary Monday morning when Tanya noticed it. The office buzzed with the usual clatter of keyboards and quiet conversations. Employees shuffled around, coffee cups in hand, their faces showing the weariness of the week ahead. Yet, something felt off. Tanya couldn't place it, but the usual routine seemed different. She sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, attempting to finish a report that had been lingering for days. The clock on the wall ticked, every second echoing in her mind. It wasn't the report that bothered her, nor the endless emails she had to reply to. It was the drawer. Tanya's desk had always been neat, organized, but there it was, an open drawer. And the thing inside it caught her attention immediately. It wasn't the cluttered pens or papers that usually lived there. No, this was something far more personal. A pair of women's underwear, folded neatly but unmistakably out of place. Tanya stared at the item for a long moment. She wasn't sure how long. The office noise seemed to fade into the background, as if the room had become silent just for her. She knew that no one had placed the underwear there. It wasn't hers. It wasn't anyone she recognized. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. A chill ran down her spine. Her first instinct was to close the drawer and pretend she hadn't seen it. But she couldn't. Something told her this wasn't an ordinary mistake. Tanya leaned in closer, almost afraid to touch it, but she did. The fabric felt soft, delicate. Not the kind of material she'd ever see in a shared office space. She quickly checked the desk around her, but there was no one nearby. Her gaze darted to her coworkers, their faces absorbed in their own work, blissfully unaware of what she had discovered. Her mind raced. What was going on here? A strange thought crossed her mind, had someone played a prank on her? It seemed absurd, but in this office, anything was possible. Yet, deep down, she knew this wasn't a joke. It felt too wrong. She knew she had to get to the bottom of it. Tanya pulled the drawer shut quickly and glanced around again, making sure no one had seen her. She wasn't sure why, but the discovery made her feel vulnerable. As if someone had crossed an invisible line. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Tanya couldn't focus on her work. The image of the underwear kept flashing in her mind, haunting her. Who had placed it there? Why? What did it mean? She felt like there was a secret hiding right under her nose, something everyone knew but her. Around lunch, she couldn't take it anymore. Tanya decided to tell someone, her closest friend at the office, Sarah. Sarah had always been her sounding board, the one person she could trust to listen and not judge. Tanya found her in the break room, sipping a coffee. "Sarah, can I talk to you about something?" Tanya asked, her voice shaking just slightly. "Of course, what's up?" Sarah asked, looking up from her phone. Tanya hesitated before speaking. "I found something weird at my desk this morning." "Something weird? What do you mean?" Tanya took a deep breath. "There was a pair of women's underwear in my drawer. Not mine. I don't know how it got there, but it was folded, neat, almost like it belonged there." Sarah's face went from calm to puzzled. "Are you serious? Who would do something like that?" "I don't know, that's the thing," Tanya said. "I've been sitting here all day trying to figure it out. No one's even mentioned it. But it feels wrong, you know? Maybe it's just a mistake. Someone could have dropped it in there by accident. Or maybe it's a prank?" Sarah suggested, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. Tanya shook her head. "It doesn't feel like a prank. I don't know why. But it's too weird." Sarah was quiet for a moment, taking in what Tanya said. Then she said, "Maybe you should just leave it alone. It could be nothing." Tanya frowned. "Yeah, maybe. But I can't shake the feeling that it's not nothing. There's something off about it." "Well, if you feel that strongly about it, you could ask around. But be careful, Tanya. You don't want to make anyone uncomfortable if it turns out to be nothing." Tanya nodded, though she wasn't sure she agreed. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. The unease she felt at the discovery didn't leave her. If anything, it grew stronger. That evening, as she was gathering her things to leave, she noticed something even stranger. The drawer was open again. Tanya's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't left it open. She was sure of it. But there it was, wide open. And inside, the underwear was gone. Her heart skipped a beat. Had someone been watching her? Had they returned to take it? Or was it just her imagination? Tanya grabbed her things, her mind spinning, and left the office faster than usual. She needed to think. But the more she thought, the more questions flooded her mind. Who had put the underwear in her desk? Why had it disappeared? And most importantly, what was really going on here? The next morning, Tanya barely slept that night. Her mind was consumed by the mystery. The questions kept her awake, turning over and over. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, that it could all be a coincidence, but the feeling lingered. Something wasn't right. She arrived at the office early the next day, her eyes scanning the room as she walked in. She couldn't shake the unease. She had to know the truth. As she sat down at her desk, she noticed something different. There was an envelope on top of her computer. It was plain, nothing special about it. Yet, the moment her eyes landed on it, Tanya knew, this was no coincidence. Tanya opened the envelope carefully. Inside, there was a single piece of paper, handwritten with a simple, chilling message. You shouldn't have looked. You have no idea what you're getting into. Her pulse quickened. She looked around the office, but no one seemed to notice. No one seemed to care. And that's when it hit her, the mystery was much bigger than she had ever imagined. As the days went on, Tanya began to notice strange things happening around her. The small office seemed to be filled with whispers, glances, and hints of something she couldn't put her finger on. People seemed to know more than they were letting on. And no one, it seemed, was willing to talk. The more Tanya tried to find answers, the more she realized the truth was just out of reach, hidden behind layers of silence, suspicion, and fear. She was in over her head. But she couldn't stop now. With every new twist, she became more determined to uncover the secret. No matter what it cost her. Tanya couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The cryptic note she found on her desk only added to her growing unease. Who could have left it? Who knew she had discovered the underwear in her drawer? And why warn her not to look any further? She had hoped that the next day would bring some clarity. But instead, it brought more confusion. She sat at her desk, fingers poised above the keyboard, but the thought of the envelope from yesterday made it impossible to focus. Her mind was swirling. Was it just a prank, as Sarah had suggested? Or was something darker at play? The office seemed quieter than usual. People went about their work with their heads down, avoiding eye contact. Tanya noticed it. It wasn't just the typical office routine. It felt different. She couldn't explain why, but the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone seemed to know something she didn't, and no one was willing to share. Around noon, Tanya decided she couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to confront Sarah. Her closest friend in the office, the one person she trusted, seemed to know the least about the situation. But Tanya had a nagging feeling that Sarah was holding back something important. After all, Sarah was the one who had suggested that it might just be a harmless prank. But Tanya wasn't so sure. She found Sarah in the break room, staring at her phone, but her friend looked up when Tanya entered. "Hey," Tanya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk? I need to ask you something." Sarah's brow furrowed slightly, sensing the seriousness in Tanya's tone. "Sure. What's going on?" Tanya glanced around the break room. The walls felt like they were closing in on her. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice even further. "You know about the underwear in my drawer, right?" Sarah's eyes widened for a moment before she quickly composed herself. "Tanya, I told you, it's probably nothing. It's just some weird office prank." Maybe someone was messing around. No, Tanya insisted. I don't think so. Someone left me a note. It said, "You shouldn't have looked. You have no idea what you're getting into." Sarah froze, her face draining of color. What did you say? A note. Right on my desk. After I found the underwear. Someone is messing with me, Sarah. But it's not a prank. I can feel it. Sarah shook her head, her eyes darting nervously. That's strange. But Tanya, you have to be careful. You don't know what you're dealing with here. What do you mean? What's going on, Sarah? Who's behind this? Sarah sighed deeply, glancing around the break room before she spoke in a hushed voice. Look, I don't know for sure, but there are things about this place, about some of the people who work here, that you don't understand. It's not just an office. Some things go on that you might not want to get involved with. Tanya's heart raced. What do you mean by that? What do you know? Sarah hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the door, as if expecting someone to walk in at any moment. I can't tell you everything. Not here. But just, be careful, okay? Tanya was stunned. What's going on, Sarah? Who's involved? But Sarah wasn't answering. Her gaze was fixed on the door, her body tense. Tanya followed her eyes, noticing a man standing in the doorway. He was a senior executive, someone Tanya had never spoken to directly before. His name was Adam Miller, and he had an air of authority that made people nervous. He was known for being cold, calculating, and always having a hand in the company's darker dealings. Tanya, Adam said, his voice smooth and controlled. Could I have a word with you? Tanya's stomach flipped. The way he said it wasn't a request, it was an order. She glanced at Sarah, but her friend's face was unreadable. There was no help coming from her. Sure, Tanya replied, her voice tight. She stood up and followed Adam out of the break room. He led her down a long hallway toward the back of the office. The deeper they went, the quieter the space became. Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something she wasn't meant to see. Adam stopped in front of a door, which he unlocked with a key card. Come in, he said smoothly, stepping aside to let her pass. Tanya entered a small office, dimly lit, with a large wooden desk that looked more like something out of a boardroom than a typical office setting. The room was surprisingly empty, no personal items, no family photos, just a few files stacked neatly on the desk. Please, have a seat, Adam said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Tanya sat down, her nerves on edge. She didn't know what to expect, but she wasn't prepared for what Adam said next. You've been snooping around, Tanya, he said, his tone icy. Tanya's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I haven't been snooping. Oh, I think you have, Adam replied, leaning forward. I know you found something in your drawer. And I know you received a message. You're starting to ask questions that no one around here wants answered. Tanya's mind raced. What's going on? Who's behind this? Adam didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. There are things happening here that are much bigger than you realize. People you work with, they aren't who they seem. I can't tell you more, but I need you to understand something, Tanya. Tanya felt a cold chill run through her. What? You need to stop asking questions, Adam said, his voice low and threatening. If you don't, you might not like what happens next. Before she could respond, he stood up and walked toward the door. That's all. You can go now. Tanya was stunned. She had no idea what she had just walked into, but she was certain of one thing, the note, the underwear, and now Adam's strange warning, they were all connected. And she had to know the truth. The following week, Tanya couldn't stop thinking about her encounter with Adam. It felt like a warning shot, a silent threat. She spent the next few days trying to act normal, going through the motions of her job, but her mind kept racing. What had she gotten herself into? Late one afternoon, Tanya decided she had no choice but to take matters into her own hands. She wasn't going to let Adam or anyone else intimidate her into silence. She had to find out the truth, no matter what. She made her way to the building's archives. It was a place most employees avoided, dimly lit, filled with dusty boxes of old files and forgotten paperwork. But Tanya had a feeling that if she was going to uncover anything, it would be here. As she sifted through some old records, she found something that made her stomach turn. There, buried among stacks of paperwork, was a file marked confidential. It was thick, filled with documents that seemed to detail financial transactions, strange agreements, and names of employees she didn't recognize. One name stood out, Evelyn Harper. She was listed as a former executive, but her file seemed to be flagged for something strange, several references to personal dealings and unusual activities. Tanya's heart raced as she flipped through the pages, piecing together a dark and twisted web of connections that no one was supposed to see. Evelyn Harper. Tanya had heard the name before, whispers around the office, rumors about her sudden departure years ago. No one had ever talked about her in detail. But Tanya knew one thing for sure now: Evelyn Harper was at the center of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "What are you doing here?" a low voice asked. Tanya spun around, her heart pounding. Standing in the doorway was none other than Sarah. Tanya's heart pounded in her chest as Sarah stood in the doorway, her face pale and tense. Tanya quickly shoved the file back into the stack of papers, but it was too late. Sarah had seen her. "What are you doing here?" Sarah's voice was low, her eyes darting around the room nervously. Tanya's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea how to respond. She hadn't expected to run into Sarah here, especially not after everything that had happened. Her mind raced, trying to figure out how to explain herself without giving away too much. She couldn't afford to trust anyone completely, not even Sarah. "I was just looking through some old files," Tanya said, trying to sound casual. "I came across something strange, and I thought it might be important." Sarah didn't seem convinced. Her gaze narrowed, and she stepped closer, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Tanya's pulse quickened, but she tried to remain calm. "Strange? What kind of strange?" Sarah's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it now. Tanya hesitated, unsure of what to say. The last thing she wanted was to drag Sarah into this mess. But at the same time, she knew Sarah had to know the truth, whatever it was. "I don't know yet," Tanya said slowly. "But I've been looking into some things. Things that don't add up. There's something going on here, Sarah. Something I'm not supposed to know about." Sarah's expression faltered for a moment, her eyes flickering with something, fear, maybe? Tanya couldn't be sure. Then, just as quickly, Sarah masked it, her face becoming unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, Tanya," Sarah said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't know what you're messing with." Tanya's gut twisted. She'd heard that before, Adam had warned her too. But this time it felt different. Sarah was scared, and that made Tanya more determined than ever to get to the bottom of this. "What do you mean?" Tanya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's really going on, Sarah? You know something, don't you?" For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. Then, she took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for something. "Look, I don't know how much you've figured out, but you need to stop. I'm serious. You don't want to get involved in this." "I already am," Tanya replied, her voice hardening. "And I'm not backing down now." Sarah's eyes filled with regret. "You're too deep already. You've seen the files, haven't you?" Tanya nodded. "Yes. I found something, Evelyn Harper." "What's her connection to all of this?" At the mention of Evelyn's name, Sarah visibly stiffened. Tanya could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched into fists. It was as if Sarah was fighting with herself, struggling with a decision she wasn't ready to make. "Evelyn Harper," Sarah repeated softly, almost as if tasting the name. She was part of the original group. A founding member of, well, of the things that run this place. The company isn't what it seems, Tanya. It was never meant to be. What do you mean, not what it seems? What's really going on? Tanya asked, her voice growing more urgent. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, lowering her voice to a whisper. You don't understand. Evelyn Harper was involved in things that shouldn't have been. Dangerous things. She was trying to cover up something big, something illegal. And when she tried to back out, well, she disappeared. Tanya's mind was spinning. What are you saying? You think Evelyn's death was part of some cover-up? Sarah hesitated. I don't know for sure. But I wouldn't be surprised. People here do whatever it takes to protect themselves. And if you're asking the wrong questions, well, they won't hesitate to get rid of you too. The warning hit Tanya hard, like a slap to the face. She could feel the weight of Sarah's words sinking in. Evelyn Harper, the mysterious woman who had been part of the company's earliest days, was no longer just a forgotten name. She was connected to something much bigger, something dangerous. Tanya had to know more. You're telling me there's a conspiracy here? Tanya asked, her voice low. That people are being silenced? That's why Adam warned me. Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with fear. It's not just Adam. It's the whole company. People in charge have been hiding things for years. And if you keep digging, you'll get yourself caught up in something you can't escape. Tanya didn't know what to think. She'd always believed in doing the right thing, in uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. But this? This was different. She had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. She stepped closer to Sarah, her voice urgent. What's the connection with the underwear? Why are they leaving those in my drawer? Why me? Sarah's eyes widened in shock. She took a step back, as if she hadn't expected Tanya to ask that question. The underwear? I don't know. But I have a theory. What is it? Tanya pressed. Sarah swallowed hard. It's a symbol. A message. Someone is trying to send you a warning. The underwear is a sign. If you're not careful, you might end up like Evelyn. Or worse. Tanya's blood ran cold. What happened to Evelyn? Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned away, her shoulders sagging in defeat. You don't want to know, she whispered. Tanya's frustration grew. Tell me, Sarah. I need to know. I'm already involved. Sarah's head snapped back to face her. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. Evelyn was a scapegoat. They made her take the fall for something that was bigger than all of us. And when she started asking too many questions, when she began digging into things that were better left untouched, they silenced her. And now they're trying to do the same to you. Tanya's mind raced as Sarah's words echoed in her ears. Silenced. Murdered. She had stumbled onto something far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. I won't stop, Tanya said firmly, her resolve hardening. I'll find out the truth. No matter what it costs. Sarah's eyes softened for a moment, but there was a sense of finality in her voice when she spoke next. You can't fight this, Tanya. You can't win. I'm not backing down, Tanya replied, her voice steely. I'll find Evelyn, and I'll find out who's behind this. And I will make them pay. Sarah opened her mouth to argue. But no words came out. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Tanya alone in the dark, filled with a sense of purpose she couldn't ignore. Later that night, Tanya couldn't sleep. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in on her. The weight of everything she had learned that day was unbearable. Evelyn's death. The company's corruption. The threats. The warning. It was all so much to process, and yet, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The notes. The underwear. The silence. the lies. It all pointed to something more, a hidden truth buried beneath layers of secrecy. She had to find out who was behind it. She had to know why they were after her. Tanya stood up from her bed and walked to her desk. She opened the drawer that had once held the mysterious underwear. It was empty now, but the eerie feeling lingered. She knew she was on the edge of uncovering something monumental. And this time, she wouldn't back down. Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The once comforting confines of her apartment now felt like a prison. Each creak of the floor, every flicker of the light, made her tense. She had crossed a line, one she couldn't easily return from. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but they only raised more questions. What was the truth behind the underwear? Why were they placed in her drawer? And most importantly, why had Sarah seemed so frightened to speak? There were more people involved in this conspiracy than she had ever imagined. She had to dig deeper, no matter the cost. The next morning, Tanya was back at the office. She couldn't afford to take time off, not with the investigation growing more urgent. She had made a list of people to approach, people who might know more about Evelyn, the company's dark secrets, and the dangerous forces that were seemingly determined to stop her from uncovering the truth. She arrived early, before anyone else. The office was quiet, the hum of computers and the distant voices of her coworkers the only sound. Tanya sat down at her desk, but instead of working, she pulled out the file again. She needed to go over it once more. Maybe she had missed something. Maybe there was a clue she hadn't noticed before. Her eyes scanned the documents. Names. Dates. Locations. The same information over and over again, but something nagged at the back of her mind. She stared at one name in particular, Evelyn Harper. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something familiar about it. Evelyn had been a part of the company's original team, but her file didn't tell the full story. There had to be more. She closed the file and glanced around the office. The only person who might know more was Adam. But even he had seemed reluctant to talk. He'd warned her to stop digging, to let it go. But Tanya couldn't just walk away, not now. She had to know. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. A message from Adam. Tanya, you need to stop. This is bigger than you think. You don't want to go down this road. Her fingers hovered over the screen, but she didn't respond. She didn't need more warnings. She needed answers. It was then that she saw him. Michael. He was walking toward her desk, his steps measured, his face unreadable. Tanya's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to see him today. Michael was one of the higher-ups at the company, someone who always seemed to be lurking in the background, watching from the shadows. He had a reputation for being cold, calculating, and ruthless. "Morning, Tanya," he said, his voice smooth but with a hint of something more. "Morning, Michael," Tanya replied, trying to sound casual. He paused for a moment, his gaze lingering on her a bit too long. "I heard you've been asking questions." Tanya's stomach tightened. How much did he know? Was he aware of what she'd uncovered? "I'm just doing my job," Tanya said quickly. "You know, following up on some old files." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Old files, huh? Funny. I don't remember you ever being interested in the past before." Tanya forced a smile, hoping her nerves didn't show. "I guess I'm just getting more curious." There was a brief pause. Michael's gaze never left her. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, Tanya. Sometimes it's better to leave things buried. Trust me on that." Tanya met his gaze, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of his words, the unspoken warning hanging in the air. He knew. He knew she was getting close to something, and he wasn't happy about it. "I'm just trying to understand," Tanya said, her voice steady despite the rising fear. "I'm sure you understand. We all want to know what happened to Evelyn." At the mention of Evelyn's name, Michael's expression shifted. For a brief moment, Tanya saw something flicker in his eyes, something dark. then, just as quickly, it was gone. Evelyn was a casualty of this business, Michael said, his voice colder than before. She got too close to the truth and paid the price. You don't want to make the same mistake. Tanya's blood ran cold. She had been right. Evelyn hadn't disappeared by accident. She had been silenced. And now, someone was trying to do the same to her. Before Tanya could respond, Michael turned on his heel and walked away, leaving her with a sinking feeling in her stomach. She knew what she had to do now. She had to find out more about Evelyn, and fast. Later that evening, Tanya's search took her to a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. It was a place she had frequented for years, a place where she could think, away from the noise of the office. The cafe was empty except for a couple of people in the corner, their conversations hushed. Tanya slid into a booth near the back, pulling out her phone and dialing a number she hadn't used in months. "Hello?" the voice on the other end answered, groggy and surprised. "Terry?" Tanya asked, her voice low. "It's Tanya. I need a favor." There was a long pause. Terry was an old friend from college, someone who had connections in places that Tanya couldn't reach. He had always been the go-to guy for things like this. "What's going on?" Terry asked, his voice suddenly alert. "I need information." "About Evelyn Harper," Tanya said. "I think she was murdered, and I need to know who was behind it." Terry's response was immediate. "You're treading dangerous ground, Tanya." "Evelyn Harper? She was a big deal. You don't want to get involved in that mess." "I don't have a choice," Tanya replied firmly. "I'm already in it." Another pause. Tanya could hear the faint sounds of traffic in the background as Terry thought it over. "All right," Terry said reluctantly. "I'll see what I can find. But you need to be careful. People don't just disappear like Evelyn did. And if someone's covering up what happened, they'll go after anyone who gets too close." Tanya's throat tightened, but she held her ground. "I know what I'm doing, Terry. Just find out what you can. I need to know who's behind this." "I'll call you in a few hours," Terry said before hanging up. Tanya sat back, her mind racing. Evelyn's death wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a calculated move. Someone wanted her gone. And now, they were coming for Tanya too. The next day, Tanya's search had taken her to places she hadn't expected. She had managed to dig up a few leads on Evelyn, mostly rumors, but enough to suggest there was more to the story than anyone had let on. The deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. But Tanya wasn't the type to back down. She had to know the truth. When she returned to the office the next day, she was met with a strange feeling, one she couldn't quite place. Her coworkers were acting oddly. Some were avoiding her gaze, while others seemed to be watching her every move. The tension in the air was thick, and Tanya could feel it pressing down on her. She went to her desk, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in her chest. But before she could settle in, Michael walked in, his eyes locking onto hers from across the room. "Still digging, I see," he said, his tone cool. Tanya didn't respond, but she could feel the weight of his gaze on her. He knew. She couldn't avoid this any longer. The truth was out there, and she was going to find it, no matter the cost. Tanya had never felt more alone in her life. Every step she took seemed to lead her deeper into a maze she couldn't escape. Each revelation made the situation worse. What had started as a curiosity about the strange occurrences surrounding Evelyn Harper's death had now turned into a full-scale investigation with more questions than answers. The night after her conversation with Terry, Tanya barely slept. She spent hours scrolling through the information she had gathered, trying to make sense of it all. What was it about Evelyn that had gotten her killed? Was it just her digging into the company's dirty secrets, or was there something even darker at play? She went over the file again. Evelyn had worked her way up the ranks within the company quickly, always pushing the boundaries. She had a reputation for being a risk-taker, someone who wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers. But that wasn't the thing that had gotten her killed. It was what she had found out, what she had uncovered before she was silenced. And Tanya was getting dangerously close to uncovering it too. The morning after her restless night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Her face looked tired, the dark circles under her eyes more prominent than ever. But despite the exhaustion, she was determined. She wasn't going to back down now. Not after everything she'd uncovered. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Terry. "I found something. Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks. Come alone." Tanya's heart raced. What could Terry have found? She knew she couldn't ignore this lead, but she couldn't help the uneasy feeling in her stomach. The docks were desolate, a place where people went to disappear. It was the last place she wanted to be alone, especially with the things she'd been discovering. But she had no choice. She had to follow through. She grabbed her jacket, took a deep breath, and left her apartment, heading toward the meeting point. The city was unusually quiet this morning, the cold breeze cutting through the air. It wasn't long before Tanya found herself standing in front of the old warehouse. The place was abandoned, the windows boarded up, and the door rusted and falling apart. It looked like no one had been here for years. Tanya's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Terry. "I'm inside. Hurry." She hesitated for a moment, her instincts telling her to turn back, but she ignored them. She couldn't stop now. The truth was too close. Tanya pushed the door open, the rusty hinges screeching in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the only sound was the distant drip of water. She could barely make out the shape of a figure sitting on an old crate in the corner. It was Terry. He looked up as she entered, his face tense and worn. "You came," Terry said, his voice low. "Of course I did," Tanya replied. "What did you find?" "What's going on, Terry?" He motioned for her to sit beside him. Tanya cautiously made her way over, her eyes scanning the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was too quiet. Too still. "I found some records," Terry said, handing her a stack of papers. "It's not much, but it's something. I think Evelyn was involved in something much bigger than we realized." Tanya took the papers, her heart pounding as she flipped through them. There were names, dates, locations, nothing that made sense at first glance. But one name stood out, Benson Corporation. The company that had funded much of the project Evelyn had worked on before her death. The company that no one talked about. The one with too many secrets. "I've heard of Benson Corporation," Tanya said, her voice tight. "They've been involved in some shady dealings over the years. But what does that have to do with Evelyn?" Terry's eyes flickered nervously. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. I couldn't get much, but I did find a report from someone who worked at Benson Corporation. It seems like Evelyn was getting too close to exposing their involvement in something illegal." "Illegal?" Tanya repeated, her mind racing. "What kind of illegal activities?" Terry shifted uneasily. "I don't know. The details are vague, but there's mention of a secret project. Something that involves a lot of money and a lot of power. The kind of power that could ruin people's lives if it got out." Tanya leaned forward, her pulse quickening. This was bigger than she had thought. "Do you think that's why Evelyn was killed? She found something and they decided she was a threat?" Terry nodded slowly. "It's the only thing that makes sense. Someone at Benson Corporation wanted to silence her. And they don't want you asking questions either, Tanya." Tanya felt a chill run down her spine. She could feel it in her bones now, the danger was real. And it was closing in on her. But she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. Not now. "I need to go to Benson Corporation," Tanya said, determination in her voice. "No," Terry said, grabbing her arm. "You can't. It's too dangerous. I know you're looking for the truth, but some truths are better left buried. You don't know what you're up against." Tanya pulled her arm free, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm already in this, Terry. I have to finish it. Terry stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. Fine. But I'm coming with you. If you go down this path, you're not going alone. The decision was made. Tanya knew there was no turning back now. Together, they would uncover the truth. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead. Later that day, Tanya and Terry stood outside the towering glass building of Benson Corporation. The company headquarters loomed over them, cold and imposing. Tanya's heart raced as she gazed up at the structure. She couldn't believe she was here, ready to confront the shadowy figures who had orchestrated Evelyn's death. How do we even get inside? Tanya whispered, her eyes scanning the front entrance. The building was heavily guarded, and there was no obvious way in. Terry's face was grim. I've been here before, but getting in now is going to be tough. They're always watching. You can't trust anyone here. Tanya didn't care. The truth was waiting for her inside. She would do whatever it took to get it. They walked to the side entrance, where a small security booth stood. There were 2 guards inside, talking in low voices. Terry and Tanya exchanged a glance. This was their only chance. Terry took a deep breath. I'll distract them. You slip inside while they're not looking. Tanya nodded, her heart pounding. She had never done anything like this before, but there was no choice. She had to be quick. Terry walked toward the booth, making casual small talk with the guards. Tanya took her cue and moved silently toward the side door. It was unlocked. She slipped inside without a sound, the adrenaline rushing through her veins. The building's interior was sleek and modern, but Tanya barely noticed the luxurious surroundings. Her mind was focused solely on one thing, finding the truth. Tanya moved quickly through the dimly lit corridors of Benson Corporation, her steps almost soundless on the polished floor. Terry was just a few paces behind her, his face tense, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The building, with its towering glass walls and sleek metallic architecture, seemed like a fortress, cold, impersonal, and full of secrets. Every step Tanya took felt like she was drawing closer to something monumental. Something that could change everything. The air was thick with anticipation, and Tanya's heart pounded in her chest. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Evelyn had died for this. She had been silenced for this. Tanya could feel the weight of the task ahead of her, the responsibility that hung heavy in the air. She was standing at the precipice of truth. They reached an elevator at the end of the hall. It was sleek, with brushed steel doors and an LED panel flashing the floor numbers. Tanya took a deep breath and pressed the button for the top floor, the executive level. It was where all the important decisions were made. The place where the truth was hidden. The place where Evelyn had been killed for getting too close to something dangerous. The elevator doors slid open silently, and they stepped inside. As the elevator ascended, Tanya couldn't help but feel the weight of everything she had uncovered. The pieces were finally starting to come together, but the truth, what Evelyn had been about to expose, was still just out of reach. Terry was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on something that seemed far away. He had been quiet since they entered the building, a sharp contrast to his usual talkative self. Tanya knew the tension had gotten to him. This was a dangerous game they were playing, and they both knew it. The elevator slowed to a stop, and the doors opened to reveal a vast, pristine lobby. Polished marble floors stretched out before them, and walls of glass framed the entire space, offering a panoramic view of the city below. It was almost too perfect, too pristine. Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong here. They stepped out into the lobby, and as they moved toward the elevator's opposite doors, Tanya spotted a security guard sitting at a desk, his eyes glued to a screen. He didn't seem to notice them at first, but Tanya held her breath as they passed, hoping he wouldn't look up. They kept their pace steady, not daring to run or draw attention to themselves. The hallway ahead was narrow, lined with offices, most of which appeared to be empty. Tanya's mind raced. She knew they were getting closer to something big, but the closer they got, the more she realized how much danger they were really in. She could feel it, someone was watching them, waiting for them to slip up. Terry stopped abruptly, causing Tanya to nearly bump into him. He was staring at the door in front of them, a heavy oak door with a brass nameplate. It read, Victor Benson, CEO. Tanya's pulse quickened. This was it. This was the door that stood between her and the truth. She could almost hear Evelyn's voice in her mind, urging her forward. She had to do this. Terry looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked quietly. Tanya nodded, her gaze fixed on the door. We've come this far. There's no turning back. With a final, resolute breath, Tanya stepped forward and turned the handle. The door creaked open, and they stepped into the office of Victor Benson, the man at the heart of everything. The room was grand, the furnishings opulent and immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, casting a soft light across the room. But Tanya didn't have time to take in the luxury. Her eyes were focused on the man behind the large wooden desk, Victor Benson himself. He was an older man, with sharp features and silver hair, dressed in an immaculate suit. He looked up from his paperwork as they entered, his expression unreadable. There was a brief moment of silence as he studied them, as though deciding how to react. Well, Victor said smoothly, his voice calm, almost too calm. What do we have here? A little intruder and her companion, I presume? Tanya felt her stomach tighten. She could see it now, the cold, calculating nature of Victor Benson. This wasn't just any corporate executive. He was the puppet master behind everything, the one pulling the strings. I came for answers, Tanya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. What did you do to Evelyn Harper? Victor leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. Evelyn was a talented employee. But she got too curious. She dug too deep, and that's where she made her mistake. Tanya clenched her fists, but she held her ground. You killed her because she uncovered something, didn't you? Something you didn't want anyone to know. Victor's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. You're very persistent. I'll give you that. But you're in over your head, Tanya. This is bigger than you realize. Tanya took a step closer to the desk, her eyes never leaving Victor's. What was she about to expose? What are you hiding? Victor sighed, his expression turning cold. You really don't understand, do you? This is about power. Control. We've created something that can change the world. But the world isn't ready for it yet. Evelyn, she wanted to expose us. She wanted to stop everything we've worked for. She was a threat. Tanya felt a shiver run down her spine. What do you mean, created something? What are you talking about? Victor paused, as if contemplating whether or not to reveal the truth. Then, with a cold smile, he spoke. Do you know about the Ether Project? He asked. Tanya's mind raced. She had heard the name before, buried in the research Evelyn had left behind. But she didn't know what it meant. The Ether Project, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Victor leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. It's a project that will revolutionize everything. We've discovered a way to manipulate human consciousness, to control minds, to create the perfect soldier, the perfect employee. But Evelyn, she wanted to expose it. She couldn't understand the bigger picture. She didn't see the necessity of it. Tanya's heart stopped. You're creating mind-controlled people? You're turning them into machines? Victor's smile widened. Not machines. Tools. Tools that will shape the future. Imagine a world where no one ever questions authority, where everything is controlled and orderly. Where we are in charge. It's the future of humanity, Tanya. It's inevitable. Tanya felt her stomach turn. She had uncovered the truth. But it was worse than she could have ever imagined. Evelyn had been right to try and stop them. This was monstrous. But the real question was, how many others had been involved in the project? How many lives had been destroyed for this? As Tanya stood there, trying to process everything, she heard a soft click from behind her. Before she could turn around, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the lights in the room flickered. The trap had been set. Did you really think you could just walk in here and uncover our secrets? Victor's voice rang out, cold and final. Tanya's pulse raced. You're not getting away with this. Victor stood up, a look of contempt in his eyes. You're too late, Tanya. It's already done. No one can stop us now. Just then, the room's temperature dropped. The air grew thick, suffocating. And Tanya realized she wasn't alone. There were more people in the shadows, more watchers than she had anticipated. Her final question hung in the air: was she too late to stop them? Or was this just the beginning of a much darker chapter?